just when it starts to get dark is when they typically leave to do their hunting. And that's also the period when deer are most active. And as you get into the nighttime, beaver will be more active. So those are their prime species that they're hunting. And so they're going to be getting active at the time it starts to get dark, and they'll be hunting probably throughout the night or until they're successful, or some nights they're not successful and they end up coming back sometime late in the evening or late in the night back to their rendezvous site in the summertime where they're holding their pups. Successful, they're going to eat as much as possible and then bring that back to the rendezvous site and regurgitate it for the pups. Occasionally there might be like a babysitter that stays behind, and they would then be fed too by those wolves that are off doing the hunting. The average pack in Wisconsin in midwinter usually is only about 4 wolves, and they typically on the average have about 5 or 6 pups born in April. So that normally will double the size of the average pack for a short period of time. But the mortality rate on pups can be relatively high, and typically only about a third survive to the end of their first year. So they're going to be using their den sites from usually about late March until end of May, early June, and then they move to rendezvous sites, and the rendezvous sites will be used from June until the end of September into early October. And so the rendezvous sites are the sites they use as their home sites where they keep the pups after the pups are big enough to be outside of the den. There will be 2 or 3 to maybe as many as 9 or 10 different rendezvous sites, depending on situations and circumstances. Sometimes if there's a kill made, they'll move their pups to a new rendezvous site so they can more easily feed on the kill. And they also will move the pups around as berry crops become available, because by July and August, as raspberries, blueberries start to get ripe, the pups and the adults will feed on those as well. And so the first few rendezvous sites are usually not too far from the den area. They're usually more open areas, places where the pups can romp about. Often even beaver meadows are favorite spots for rendezvous sites. Both in part, they have good water. They've got drinking water nearby. Beaver ponds often are fringed by dense cover like alders or fir and spruce trees. So good escape cover as well as shade. And those beaver meadows are great places for meadow voles to romp about. And that becomes one of the first things the pups learn to hunt, is hunting the meadow voles in the meadow. So it gives them snacks to feed on while they're waiting for the adults to come back to feed them more substantial meals. The sense of smell, there's evidence that they can smell a mile or more away. They can hear each other probably 6 miles away. So the sense of smell, sense of hearing are very important. But when they're getting close to an actual kill, their eyesight will be important as well. Their eyesight's just a little bit better than ours. They're not a great deal better, but they're better for seeing in the dark. They have more rods and less cones, so they're better able to see in the dark than we are, and that's going to be critical for catching animals in the dark. And howling, of course, that is an activity mostly done at night. And again, because that is when they're doing a lot of their hunting and when they're also patrolling their territories. So it's also time they want to be able to connect to each other. But they also howl to display the locations of territory, to warn other wolves to stay away from the territory, or to just let other wolves know this is an occupied area, so that other wolves try to avoid those places. For the most part, wolves want to avoid physical conflicts, and howling is one of the ways they kind of space themselves out in the landscape. And we do use howling then as a way to study wolves, to learn where they're at in the summertime and if a pack has pups with them. And we try to be very careful with this, because they may decide just because this strange wolf is in a territory, they're going to hang around with the pups the rest of the night. So we try to be very careful with our howl surveys not to do them excessively in any one pack, because it potentially does disrupt their normal hunting activity. I think maybe the coolest, I don't know if it's so much what they did, is being able to hear a full chorus of wolves where there's adults and pups howling away while you're also seeing the northern lights off in the distance. And that just, I've had only a few times I've been able to see that, but that's just that's magical almost. I enjoy taking people out on wolf howls, and I think often one of the things that people get most amazed by outside if they get to hear wolves, we don't always hear wolves. It's maybe about half the time out, but I think just seeing the northern sky with almost no lights in the background is just people don't get to see that often. But just being able to get out and see the stars and seeing the Milky Way and getting beautiful views of the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, and the various other constellations. It's just people just get amazed just seeing the sky.